Baby found, 3 German shepherds. Inside a trash bin, what the baby did next left people in tears. What happened that stormy night will shock you. A 5-year-old boy's simple act of kindness turned into something nobody saw coming. Before we begin, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more incredible stories like this one. The story you're about to listen to started with the sound of thunder and ended with tears of joy from an entire community. But between those moments lay secrets, danger, and a courage so pure it changed everything. The rain hammered the narrow streets of Hillcrest's neighborhood like bullets against glass. Streetlights flickered on and off, casting dancing shadows that made every corner look alive with movement. The storm had been building all evening, and now it unleashed its fury on the small grocery store at the end of Maple Street. 5-year-old Danny clutched his father's hand as they hurried through the downpour. His small sneakers splashed through puddles that seemed to grow deeper with every step. Marcus, his father, pulled his jacket tighter around both of them, trying to shield his son from the worst of the storm. "Almost there, buddy," Marcus called over the thunder, his voice barely audible above the rain. "Just need to grab some milk and we'll be home." They had been visiting Danny's grandmother across town when the storm hit. Now, with the roads flooded and buses stopped, this little grocery store was their only hope for basic supplies before the long walk home. The grocery store's back alley was a maze of overflowing trash bins and scattered debris. The wind had knocked over several containers, spilling their contents across the wet pavement. Glass bottles rolled back and forth with each gust, creating an orchestra of clinking and scraping sounds. Marcus fumbled with his keys, trying to lock the car while balancing a small bag of groceries. The parking lot behind the store was cramped and poorly lit, with only one flickering streetlight providing any visibility. "Dad, wait!" Danny said suddenly, his small voice cutting through the storm's noise. Marcus looked down at his son, who had stopped walking and was tilting his head to one side. The boy's eyes were wide, focused on something Marcus couldn't see or hear. "What is it, Danny?" "We need to get out of this rain." Danny held up his tiny hand, asking for silence. He cupped his ears with both hands, the way he always did when he was trying to listen to something important. His father waited, water dripping from his hair, wondering what could possibly capture his son's attention in this chaos. Then Danny heard it again. A soft thump followed by what sounded like a whimper. It was coming from the large metal trash bin near the alley's back wall. The bin's lid kept bouncing up and down in the wind, never quite staying closed. "Someone's crying," Danny said, his voice filled with certainty. Marcus looked toward the trash bin, seeing nothing but shadows and scattered garbage. The storm was getting worse, and he wanted nothing more than to get his son home safely. "It's probably just cats, Danny. Strays hiding from the rain. We need to go." But Danny wouldn't move. He stood perfectly still, his small frame getting soaked, listening to sounds only he seemed to hear. His father tugged gently at his hand, but the boy planted his feet firmly on the wet pavement. "Dad, it sounds like me when I'm scared," Danny whispered, and something in his voice made Marcus stop pulling. The father looked at his son's face, illuminated by the flickering streetlight. Danny's expression was serious, almost adult-like, as if he understood something about fear that went beyond his 5 years. Another gust of wind sent the trash bin's lid flying open, then slamming shut with a metallic bang. But in that brief moment, Marcus thought he heard something too. Not quite a cat's meow, but something else entirely. "Please, Dad, just look, just once." Marcus sighed, torn between his protective instincts and his son's unusual determination. The alley was dangerous at night, especially during a storm. Broken glass sparkled in the puddles, and who knew what else might be lurking in the shadows. But Danny's words echoed in his mind. "It sounds like me when I'm scared." Against his better judgment, Marcus approached the trash bin cautiously, Danny close behind him. The metal container was large and industrial, the kind used by restaurants and stores to handle large volumes of waste. Its lid was heavy and kept bouncing in the wind, never staying closed for more than a few seconds. As they got closer, the sound became clearer. It wasn't cats. It was definitely something else, something that made a different kind of distress call. Marcus grabbed the lid during a brief lull in the wind and lifted it carefully. The smell hit him first. Not just garbage, but something else. Something that made his stomach turn. "Oh my God," he breathed. Inside the trash bin, pressed down under plastic bags and tangled in what looked like rope or wire, were three shapes. Three pairs of golden eyes stared up at them through the darkness, reflecting the streetlight like tiny mirrors. Dogs. Three German shepherds, packed into the bin like discarded items. Danny gasped and immediately tried to climb up the side of the bin. "They're hurt, Dad! We have to help them!" Marcus caught his son around the waist, pulling him back. His mind raced as he tried to process what he was seeing. These weren't just stray dogs seeking shelter. They had been placed here, deliberately, and left to die. The largest of the three dogs, a magnificent German shepherd with dark markings around his face, was positioned protectively over the other two. Despite being trapped and clearly injured, he kept his body between his companions and any potential threat. The second dog, smaller and lighter, in color, was shaking uncontrollably. Her eyes darted between Marcus and Danny, filled with terror, but also something else, hope. The third dog, medium-sized with distinctive black and tan markings, had blood on his front paw. He was trying to lick his wound while staying close to the others. "Rex," Danny said suddenly, pointing to the largest dog. "That's Rex, and she's Misty," he indicated the shaking one. "And he's Flash," he finished, looking at the injured dog. Marcus stared at his son in amazement. "Danny, you can't just name them. We don't know where they came from or—" "They don't have names anymore, Dad. Look at their eyes. Nobody with a name gets thrown away like trash." The simple truth in his son's words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He looked more closely at the dogs and noticed details that made his blood run cold. There were zip ties around their muzzles, though they had managed to work them loose enough to breathe and make small sounds. Their fur was matted with something sticky, and there were marks around their necks that suggested they had been wearing tight collars recently. "This isn't right," Marcus muttered, pulling out his phone to call the police. But as he dialed, Danny was already reaching toward the dogs, making soft clicking sounds with his tongue. The largest dog, Rex, tilted his head at the boy's voice. Misty stopped shaking for a moment, and Flash looked up from his wounded paw. "Hey, it's okay," Danny whispered to them. "We found you. You're not alone anymore." The storm continued to rage around them, but something had shifted in that alley. Marcus found himself looking at his son with new eyes. This wasn't just childhood curiosity or impulsiveness. Danny understood something about fear and abandonment that most adults never grasped. "Dad, we can't leave them here. They're scared and hurt, and whoever put them here might come back." As if summoned by those words, Marcus noticed a pair of headlights at the far end of the alley. A dark sedan was idling there, its lights off except for the brief moment when they had illuminated the scene. Now the car sat in shadow, but Marcus could feel eyes watching them. "Danny, step back from the bin, now!" The urgency in his father's voice made Danny freeze. He looked where his father was looking and saw the dark shape of the car at the alley's entrance. "Who is that, Dad?" "I don't know, but we need to get these dogs out of here, right now." Marcus looked around frantically. His small hatchback was parked 20 feet away, but getting three large dogs from the bin to the car without proper equipment seemed impossible. The dogs were weak, possibly injured, and certainly traumatized. But as he tried to figure out logistics, Danny had already climbed onto an overturned milk crate and was reaching into the bin. Rex, the largest dog, actually moved closer to the boy's small hand instead of away from it. "Danny, be careful. These are big dogs, and they're scared. They might—" Rex gently licked Danny's fingers, then looked directly into the boy's eyes. In that moment, something passed between them, an understanding that transcended species and circumstance. "He won't hurt me, Dad. None of them will. They know we're here to help." The sedan's engine revved once, then the car slowly began to move closer to where they stood. Marcus felt his heart rate spike. Whoever had dumped these dogs here had returned, and they obviously didn't want witnesses. "We have to go, now." Marcus lifted Danny down from the crate and grabbed the largest trash bag he could find, dumping out its contents. "Help me line this with something clean." Danny pulled off his own jacket, a small red windbreaker that their grandmother had bought him. "Use this, Dad, for Flash's paw." Working together, they created a makeshift stretcher from the empty trash bag and Danny's jacket. Rex seemed to understand what they were trying to do, and actually helped by nudging Flash toward the makeshift carrier. The sedan was now only 50 feet away, moving slowly but deliberately in their direction. Marcus lifted Flash first, surprised by how light the injured dog felt. Malnutrition, he realized. These dogs had been neglected for a long time before being dumped here. Danny climbed back up and somehow managed to coax Misty out of the bin. The shaking dog seemed to trust the small boy instinctively, following his gentle guidance, even though she was twice his size. Rex was the most challenging. As the protector of the group, he was reluctant to leave the bin until both his companions were safely out. But when Danny called to him with the same soft clicking sounds, the big dog gathered his strength and leaped down. All three dogs stood in the rain-soaked alley, free but weak, looking to Marcus and Danny for guidance. The sedan had stopped about 30 feet away, and Marcus could see the silhouette of someone in the driver's seat, watching them. "Quick, to the car," Marcus whispered. But as they turned toward the hatchback, Danny stopped and looked back at the trash bin. Something white was tied to the inside edge, something they hadn't noticed in their hurry to rescue the dogs. "Dad, look!" It was a zip tie, but not like the ones that had been around the dogs' muzzles. This one was wider, newer, and it had numbers stamped into the plastic. Numbers and letters that looked official, like some kind of identification code. Marcus grabbed the zip tie and stuffed it into his pocket just as the sedan's headlights suddenly blazed to life, illuminating the entire alley like a spotlight. "Run!" They ran through the rain, three frightened dogs and a father and son team who had stumbled into something much bigger than a simple rescue. Behind them, the sedan's engine roared to life, but instead of pursuing them, it backed out of the alley quickly and disappeared into the stormy night. As Marcus fumbled with his car keys, hands shaking from adrenaline and cold rain, Danny was already in the back seat, creating space for their unexpected passengers. The boy had torn up his own car blanket to make beds for each dog, talking to them in a constant soothing whisper. "It's okay now. We're going home. You're safe. Nobody's going to hurt you anymore." Rex climbed into the car first, positioning himself between the other dogs and the outside world, still protecting them even in safety. Misty curled into the smallest space possible, but for the first time since they'd found her, she stopped shaking. Flash lay down carefully, favoring his injured paw, but pressing close to Danny's leg. As Marcus started the engine, he caught sight of his son in the rearview mirror. Danny had his arms around all three dogs, and despite being soaked and exhausted, his face showed pure contentment. But it was something else that made Marcus's breath catch. Danny was crying quietly, not from fear or sadness, but from relief, as if he had been searching for these dogs his whole life without knowing it. The drive home through the flooded streets gave Marcus time to think about what they had witnessed. The zip tie in his pocket felt like evidence of something criminal. The sedan following them suggested they had interrupted more than just animal abandonment. And the way the dogs had responded to Danny, the immediate trust and connection, seemed almost impossible given their obvious trauma. "Dad?" Danny's voice was small in the darkness of the car. "Yeah, buddy? I think someone very bad hurt them. But I think they were very good dogs before the bad thing happened." Marcus looked again in the rearview mirror. Flash had fallen asleep with his head on Danny's lap. Misty was pressed against the boy's side, and Rex sat alert but calm, occasionally licking Danny's hand. "I think you're right, Danny. I think they were very good dogs who got caught up in something terrible. Are we going to keep them?" The question Marcus had been dreading. 3 large dogs, possible injuries, unknown medical history, and whatever legal complications might arise from their dramatic rescue. "We'll figure it out, buddy. First, we need to get them dry and warm and see how badly they're hurt." But even as he spoke, Marcus realized the decision had already been made, not by him, but by some force that had brought his son to that alley at exactly the right moment to hear sounds no adult would have noticed. As they pulled into their apartment complex's parking lot, Marcus saw lights on in several windows despite the late hour. Their neighbor, Mrs. Chen, was watching from her balcony, and when she saw them getting out with 3 large dogs, she immediately called down to them. "Marcus? Is everything all right? Do you need help?" And that's when Marcus realized this story was just beginning. What had started as a simple rescue was about to become something much larger, something that would involve their entire community and change all their lives in ways none of them could imagine. The storm continued to rage outside, but inside Marcus's car, wrapped in the warmth of unexpected love and protection, 3 discarded dogs were beginning to remember what it felt like to be safe. Mrs. Chen was already waiting at the bottom of the stairs when they pulled up, her arms full of towels and her face creased with concern. She had lived in the building longer than anyone and had a reputation for appearing exactly when people needed help most. "I saw you coming from my window," she called out as Marcus opened the car door. "These poor babies look half dead. Bring them up to my place first. I've got space heaters running and soup on the stove." But Danny shook his head firmly. "They need to come to our house first. They're scared of new places." Mrs. Chen looked at the 5-year-old boy, then at the 3 enormous dogs who were indeed pressed close to him, as if he were their anchor in an uncertain world. "You're right, little one, but let me help anyway." The next hour turned into a carefully orchestrated rescue operation. Mrs. Chen brought towels, blankets, and her old first aid kit. Mr. Rodriguez from 3B contributed his space heater and a bag of rice to help dry out wet fur. Even cranky old Mr. Thompson from the ground floor appeared with a bottle of hydrogen peroxide and some gauze. "Used to be a medic," he grumbled, kneeling beside Flash to examine the injured paw. "This isn't too bad, but it needs cleaning. Looks like wire cut, maybe from trying to escape something." Marcus's small apartment suddenly felt enormous with all the activity. The living room had been transformed into a makeshift veterinary clinic, with Danny serving as the head nurse. He moved between the 3 dogs with remarkable confidence, talking to them constantly in his soft, reassuring voice. "Rex, you're being so brave. Misty, it's okay if you want to hide behind the couch. Nobody's going to make you do anything scary. Flash, Mr. Thompson is going to make your paw feel better, but it might sting a little bit." What amazed everyone was how the dogs responded to the boy. Rex, who should have been protective and possibly aggressive after their trauma, allowed Danny to guide him wherever needed. Misty, despite her obvious terror, calmed visibly when Danny sat beside her. And Flash actually wagged his tail weakly when the boy praised him for being patient during his paw treatment. Marcus tried calling the emergency veterinary clinic, but the storm had knocked out phone lines across half the city. Mrs. Chen suggested calling Dr. Maya, a veterinarian who lived across town, but might be willing to give advice over the phone if they could reach her. After several attempts, they managed to get through on Mrs. Chen's landline. Dr. Maya listened carefully to their description of the dog's condition and gave them detailed instructions for basic care. "Keep them warm and quiet," her voice crackled through the old phone. "Small amounts of water every 15 minutes, but no food yet. Their systems might be too shocked. Clean any obvious wounds with hydrogen peroxide, but don't try to do major medical work. Most importantly, watch for signs of shock or internal injuries." "How will we know?" Marcus asked. "Rapid breathing, cold gums, weakness beyond what you'd expect from malnutrition. If you see any of that, you need to get them to a clinic immediately, storm or no storm." As Dr. Maya spoke, Danny was methodically checking each dog according to her instructions. He lifted their lips to look at their gums, felt their noses for temperature, and watched their breathing patterns with the focus of an experienced veterinarian. "Flash's gums are pink," he reported. "Rex feels warm, but not too hot. Misty's nose is cold and wet now instead of dry like before." Dr. Maya paused on the other end of the line. "How old did you say this boy is?" "5, Marcus replied, watching his son with growing amazement. "He's got natural instincts. Trust them. I'll try to get to you tomorrow morning if the road's clear, but for tonight, it sounds like you're in good hands." After the call ended, the neighbors gradually returned to their own apartments, leaving Marcus and Danny alone with their unexpected house guests. The apartment felt strangely quiet after all the activity, with only the sound of rain against the windows and 3 dogs breathing softly in their makeshift beds. Danny had refused his own pillow and blanket, insisting that the dogs needed them more. Instead, he curled up on the floor between all 3 animals, one small hand resting on each dog within reach. "Danny, you should sleep in your own bed," Marcus said gently. "I can't, Dad. What if they have nightmares? What if they wake up and think they're still in the scary place?" Marcus looked at his son, sprawled on the floor in his damp clothes, more concerned about the comfort of 3 strange dogs than his own. Something had shifted in the boy during their rescue mission. He seemed older somehow, more purposeful. "At least let me get you dry clothes and another blanket." While Danny changed into his pajamas, Marcus took the opportunity to examine the zip tie he had grabbed from the trash bin. Under the bright kitchen light, the numbers and letters were clearly visible. KR9-2847, stamped into the white plastic, along with a small logo that looked like a stylized dog silhouette. He had never seen anything like it. It looked official, almost like the kind of identification tags used by government agencies or large institutions. But what kind of organization would stamp ID numbers onto zip ties and then use them to discard animals like garbage? Marcus photographed the zip tie with his phone and did a quick internet search, but the combination of letters and numbers yielded no immediate results. The logo was too small and unclear to identify through reverse image searching. When he returned to the living room, he found Danny sitting cross-legged between the three dogs, telling them a story in a whisper. And then the little boy found the magic key that opened all the locked doors, and all the scared animals could come out and play in the sunshine again. They weren't scared anymore because they knew someone loved them. Flash had lifted his head and was watching Danny intently, as if understanding every word. Misty had crept closer during the story, and Rex had positioned himself where he could see both the door and the windows, still protecting, but no longer tense with fear. "They like stories," Danny observed when he noticed his father watching. "Rex, especially. I think he's smart enough to know what I'm talking about." Marcus sat down on the couch, studying the scene before him. "Danny, how did you know they were in that trash bin? I mean, really. I was standing right there, and I didn't hear anything until you made me listen." Danny considered the question seriously, tilting his head the same way he had in the alley. "Sometimes, when you're really quiet inside, you can hear things that are quiet outside. Like when I'm scared at night, and you come check on me before I even call for you. You hear me being scared even when I don't make noise." The simple profundity of his son's explanation left Marcus speechless. But before he could respond, Rex suddenly lifted his head and stared toward the front door, his ears pricked forward in alert attention. "What is it, Rex?" Danny whispered. A moment later, they all heard it, footsteps in the hallway outside their apartment. Slow, deliberate footsteps that paused directly outside their door. Marcus felt his heart rate spike as he remembered the dark sedan from the alley. He moved quietly to the peephole and looked out into the hallway. A man in a dark jacket stood outside their door, not knocking, just standing there. He held something in his hand that looked like a small electronic device, and he seemed to be listening or scanning for something. Marcus pulled back from the peephole and looked at the dogs. All three were now alert, with Rex moving silently to position himself between Danny and the door. But none of them were growling or showing signs of aggression. Instead, they seemed to be preparing to hide or flee. The footsteps moved on, stopping at other doors down the hallway. Marcus waited several minutes before looking through the peephole again, but the hallway was empty. "Dad?" Danny's voice was small. "Rex is scared again, and Misty won't stop looking at the door." Marcus knelt down beside his son and the dogs. "It's okay, probably just someone who got off on the wrong floor, but maybe we should keep the lights low for a while, just in case." They settled back down, but the atmosphere in the room had changed. The dogs remained alert, and Marcus found himself checking the locks on the door and windows. Danny seemed to sense the adults' tension and moved even closer to the dogs, as if his presence could shield them from whatever had them worried. Around midnight, Flash began to whimper softly in his sleep. His legs moved as if he were running, and his breathing became rapid and shallow. Danny immediately moved to sit beside the dreaming dog, placing his small hand gently on Flash's side. "It's just a dream, Flash. You're safe now. The scary place can't reach you here." But Flash's distress seemed to trigger memories in the other dogs as well. Misty began shaking again, and Rex started a low, almost inaudible whining that spoke of trauma too deep for healing in just one night. Danny looked at his father with eyes far too wise for his 5 years. "They all have the same nightmare, Dad. Someone hurt them really bad, and they're scared it's going to happen again." "How can you tell?" "Because I used to have those dreams too, after Mom died, when I was afraid you might go away too." Marcus felt his chest tighten. His wife had died when Danny was barely 3, and although the boy rarely mentioned her, Marcus sometimes wondered how much he remembered and how much the loss still affected him. "But you helped me feel safe again," Danny continued, "and now we can help them feel safe." For the next hour, Danny moved between the three dogs like a tiny therapy counselor, offering comfort to whichever animal seemed to need it most. He sang softly to Misty, told Rex stories about brave dogs who protected their families, and massaged Flash's neck and shoulders until the injured dog relaxed back into peaceful sleep. Marcus watched his son work his small miracle and realized he was witnessing something extraordinary. Danny wasn't just showing compassion, he was demonstrating an understanding of trauma and healing that most adults never developed. "Dad," Danny said around 1 a.m., "I think someone taught them to be scared of people, but they're trying to remember how to trust again." "What makes you think that?" "Watch." Danny held out his hand to Rex, palm up, and waited. The big dog looked at the small hand for a long moment, then very gently placed his paw in Danny's palm. That's not something scared dogs do. That's something trained dogs do. Someone taught them good things before someone taught them scary things. The insight was startling in its accuracy. These dogs did show signs of training. They responded to voice commands, they understood boundaries, and they showed discipline even in their traumatized state. But they also showed signs of systematic abuse or neglect. As the night wore on, Marcus found himself thinking about the zip tie, the mysterious sedan, the man in the hallway, and now his son's observation about the dog's training. Pieces of a puzzle were starting to form, but he couldn't see the complete picture yet. Around 2 a.m., the storm finally began to subside. The rain gentled from a hammering downpour to a steady patter, and the thunder moved off into the distance. With the calming of the weather, all 4 of their house guests finally settled into genuine sleep. Danny curled up with his head pillowed on Rex's side, one arm around Misty, and his free hand resting on Flash's back. The 3 dogs arranged themselves protectively around the small boy, creating a cocoon of warmth and safety in the middle of Marcus's living room floor. Marcus covered them all with extra blankets and settled into his armchair to keep watch. He dozed fitfully, waking every hour or so to check on his unusual household. It was during one of these wake periods around 4 a.m. that he heard the sound, a soft electronic beeping coming from somewhere in the room. At first he thought it might be his phone or alarm clock, but the sound was too regular, too mechanical. Following the sound, he traced it to Flash's neck area. Working carefully so as not to wake anyone, Marcus ran his fingers through the dog's matted fur and felt something hard and small embedded near the collar line. A microchip, but not the kind used for standard pet identification. This one felt larger, more sophisticated, and it was beeping softly every 30 seconds. Marcus sat back in his chair, staring at the sleeping group on his floor, and realized their quiet rescue had just become something much more complicated. Someone wasn't just looking for 3 missing dogs. They were tracking them with technology, and they were getting closer. What do you think that mysterious beeping sound really means? And who do you think was lurking in the hallway outside their door? Marcus spent the remaining hours until dawn, researching everything he could find about advanced pet tracking systems, but nothing matched what he had felt embedded in Flash's neck. The beeping had stopped around 5 a.m., but that only made him more nervous. Either the device had run out of battery, or worse, it had successfully transmitted their location to whoever was looking for these dogs. When morning light finally filtered through the apartment windows, Danny was the first to wake. He stretched carefully, trying not to disturb the 3 dogs who had arranged themselves around him like furry guardians. Rex opened one eye, assessed the situation, and then closed it again with what looked remarkably like contentment. "Dad, are you awake?" Danny whispered. "I've been awake most of the night, buddy. How did you sleep?" "Really good. I think they did too. Flash didn't have any more bad dreams after I told him about the magic key story." Marcus smiled despite his exhaustion and worry. His son's natural ability to comfort traumatized animals continued to amaze him. But their peaceful morning was interrupted by a sharp knock at the door. Danny sat up quickly, and all 3 dogs immediately went into alert mode. Rex moved to the front of the group, placing himself between the door and Danny. Misty pressed herself against the couch, trying to become invisible. Flash struggled to his feet despite his injured paw, ready to flee, if necessary. "It's okay," Marcus said quietly, checking the peephole. "It's just Mrs. Chen." But when he opened the door, Mrs. Chen wasn't alone. She was accompanied by a young woman in scrubs carrying a large medical bag. "This is Dr. Sarah," Mrs. Chen explained. "She's the veterinarian I told you about. She managed to get here despite the storm damage." Dr. Sarah was younger than Marcus had expected, probably in her early 30s, with kind eyes and a calm demeanor that immediately put everyone at ease. She moved slowly into the apartment, allowing the dogs to see her clearly and assess whether she posed a threat. "These must be our rescue patients," she said softly, kneeling down several feet away from the dogs. "They're beautiful animals. German shepherds?" "Yes," Marcus replied. "We found them last night in the terrible conditions. They've been abandoned, possibly abused." Dr. Sarah nodded, studying each dog carefully. "I can see signs of malnutrition and stress. The one with the injured paw needs immediate attention, but they all look like they'll recover with proper care." Danny approached Dr. Sarah cautiously. "Their names are Rex, Misty, and Flash. They're scared of new people, but they're really good dogs." "I'm sure they are," Dr. Sarah smiled. "Would you like to help me examine them? Sometimes animals feel safer when a friend is nearby." For the next hour, Dr. Sarah conducted thorough examinations of all 3 dogs while Danny assisted, holding their heads and talking to them in his soothing voice. Marcus watched, amazed once again by his son's natural connection with the animals. "Flash's paw will heal fine with proper cleaning and bandaging," Dr. Sarah reported. "Rex has some old scars that suggest previous injuries, but nothing current that needs treatment. Misty is mostly suffering from severe stress and malnutrition." She paused, running her hands more carefully over each dog's neck and back. "But there's something else, something that concerns me." "What is it?" Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew. "All 3 of these dogs have surgical scars consistent with implanted tracking devices. Professional grade, the kind used by law enforcement or military working dog programs." Danny looked up from where he was gently petting Misty. "What does that mean?" Dr. Sarah exchanged a glance with Marcus before answering. "It means these aren't just regular pets, sweetie. These dogs were trained for special work, and someone spent a lot of money on them." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "So, whoever dumped them will probably come looking for them." "It's possible, but here's what's really strange. The scars are healed, but recent. Someone removed the original chips and implanted new ones within the last few weeks." Dr. Sarah pulled out a handheld scanner and ran it over each dog's neck area. The device beeped when she reached Flash, confirming Marcus's discovery from the night before. "This chip isn't standard pet identification. It's transmitting on a frequency I've never seen before." She looked at Marcus seriously. "Whoever is tracking these dogs has access to military or government-grade technology." The weight of her words settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Danny continued petting the dogs, but Marcus could see the worry creeping into his son's expression. "What should we do?" Marcus asked. "Well, legally, you should report finding them to animal control. But given the circumstances..." Dr. Sarah trailed off, clearly torn between official protocol and her instincts that something criminal was involved. Their conversation was interrupted by another knock at the door, this one more forceful and official sounding. Marcus checked the peephole and saw a man in a police uniform standing in the hallway. "Police!" the officer called out. "We received a report about found animals." Marcus opened the door to find Officer Jake Williams, a young policeman he recognized from the neighborhood. Jake had always been friendly, often stopping to chat with Danny when they encountered him during their walks. "Morning, Marcus. Sorry to bother you so early, but we got a call about some German shepherds that were found last night. Animal control is backed up because of the storm, so they asked us to check it out." "Come in, Officer Williams," Marcus said, though something about the timing felt too convenient. Jake entered the apartment and immediately saw the 3 dogs, Dr. Sarah, and the medical supplies scattered around the living room. "Looks like you've been busy. These the dogs that were reported found." "We rescued them from a dumpster behind Miller's grocery," Danny piped up before Marcus could answer. "Someone threw them away like trash, but they're good dogs who just needed help." Jake smiled at Danny, but Marcus noticed the officer's eyes were carefully cataloging every detail of the scene. "That's awful, buddy. Good thing you found them. Can you tell me exactly what happened?" As Danny launched into an animated retelling of their rescue adventure, Marcus watched Jake's face. The officer seemed genuinely interested in Danny's story, but he was also taking notes in a small pad, and his questions were more detailed than a routine animal control check would require. "Did you notice anyone else in the area when you found them?" Jake asked. "Any vehicles or people who seemed out of place?" Marcus hesitated. The dark sedan and the mysterious man in the hallway felt important, but something was making him cautious about sharing too much information. "It was storming pretty hard," he said finally. "Visibility was poor." Dr. Sarah stood up from where she had been examining Rex. "Officer Williams, I'm Dr. Sarah Mitchell. I've been treating these animals, and I have some concerns about their condition that go beyond simple abandonment." Jake turned his attention to her, and Marcus noticed his posture shift slightly. "What kind of concerns, Doctor?" "These dogs show signs of professional training and have surgical scars consistent with tracking device implantation. This isn't a case of someone dumping unwanted pets. This appears to be systematic disposal of valuable working animals." Jake's pen stopped moving across his notepad. "Working animals? Like police dogs?" "Possibly, or military or private security. The point is, someone invested significant time and money in training these dogs, then tried to dispose of them. That suggests something criminal." The officer closed his notepad and looked around the room again, this time with obvious concern. "Dr. Mitchell, would you be willing to file an official report about your findings? And Marcus, I think we need to talk about additional security measures for you and Danny." "Security measures?" Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. If these dogs were stolen from a legitimate program, the thieves might come looking for them. And if they were discarded by criminals trying to cover their tracks, those people definitely won't want witnesses. Danny looked up from where he was sitting with Flash, his 5-year-old mind struggling to process the implications of what the adults were discussing. "Are the bad people going to come back for Rex and Misty and Flash?" he asked quietly. Jake knelt down to Danny's eye level. "We're going to do everything we can to make sure that doesn't happen, buddy, but your dad is right to be careful for a while." As if summoned by the mention of danger, Rex stood up and moved to the window, looking out at the street below. His posture was alert but not aggressive, more like a soldier scanning for potential threats. "He's watching for something," Danny observed. "He does that sometimes, like he's keeping guard." Dr. Sarah joined Rex at the window. "That's definitely trained behavior. These dogs have been conditioned to assess and monitor their environment." She turned back to the group. "Officer Williams, I think there's something else you should know. I detected an active tracking signal from one of the dogs. Someone is monitoring their location right now." Jake's expression turned serious. "Are you certain?" "Absolutely. The frequency is unusual, but the signal is strong and consistent." Marcus felt his heart rate spike as he remembered the beeping from the night before and the man in the hallway with the electronic device. "Jake," he said urgently, "last night around midnight, someone was standing outside our door with what looked like a scanner or tracking device. And there was a dark sedan following us when we left the alley where we found the dogs." The officer was already reaching for his radio. "This changes everything. You and Danny may be in immediate danger." Danny stood up quickly, moving protectively toward the 3 dogs. "We can't let the bad people take them back. They were scared and hurt when we found them." "Nobody's taking them anywhere," Jake said firmly. "But we need to get everyone to a safe location while we figure out what's really going on here." Dr. Sarah began packing her medical supplies. "I can take the dogs to my clinic. It's secure, and I have facilities to care for them properly." "No," Danny said with surprising firmness. "They need to stay with us. They're just starting to feel safe again." Marcus looked at his son, who was now standing with one hand on each of the 3 dogs, looking remarkably mature for his 5 years. The dogs seemed to sense the tension in the room and had moved closer to Danny, as if they understood he was their protector. "Danny's right," Marcus said finally. "Separating them now would be traumatic for everyone, but we can't stay here if there's a tracking signal." Jake nodded. "I know a place. My sister has a cabin about an hour outside the city. No cell service, no internet, completely off the grid. You could stay there while we investigate." "What about the tracking device?" Dr. Sarah asked. "Can you remove it?" Dr. Sarah considered the question. "It's possible, but it would require surgery. And there's a risk that removing it might trigger some kind of alert to whoever is monitoring the signal." Danny looked up at Flash, who was watching the adults with intelligent eyes that seemed to understand every word of their conversation. "Flash, would it hurt if Dr. Sarah took the scary beeping thing out of your neck?" Flash tilted his head and made a soft whining sound, then gently licked Danny's hand. "He says he trusts us to do what's best," Danny translated seriously. Despite the gravity of the situation, all 3 adults smiled at Danny's interpretation. But their amusement was short-lived, as Rex suddenly stiffened at the window and let out a low, warning bark. Jake immediately moved to the window and peered out carefully. There's a van parked across the street that wasn't there when I arrived. Dark windows, engine running. Marcus felt his blood turn cold. The same type of vehicle from last night? Different vehicle, but same suspicious behavior. Jake was already on his radio, calling for backup. We need to move now. Dr. Sarah began gathering the dogs' makeshift bedding and the medical supplies they would need. I can perform the surgery to remove the tracking device once we get to the cabin. Danny was already moving, collecting the small toys and treats they had given the dogs during the night. Come on, Rex, Misty, Flash, we're going on an adventure. The dogs responded immediately to Danny's calm guidance, following him toward the door, despite the obvious tension in the room. Their trust in the small boy was complete and unwavering. Jake checked the hallway carefully before motioning them forward. My car is in the back parking lot. We'll go down the rear stairwell. As they made their way through the building, Marcus carried Dr. Sarah's medical bag, while she helped support Flash, who was still favoring his injured paw. Danny walked between Rex and Misty, one hand on each dog, talking to them constantly in his soothing voice. It's okay. We're all staying together. Nobody gets left behind. They made it to Jake's police cruiser without incident, but as they were loading the dogs into the back seat, Marcus caught sight of movement in an upstairs window of their building. Someone was watching them leave, someone who definitely wasn't a neighbor. Jake, he said quietly, 3rd floor, 2nd window from the left. The officer glanced up casually and swore under his breath. They're already inside the building. He accelerated out of the parking lot, quickly but smoothly, not wanting to panic the dogs or Danny. But Marcus could see the tension in his shoulders and the way his eyes constantly checked the rearview mirror. Are we being followed? Dr. Sarah asked. Not yet, but we will be soon. The tracking signal will lead them to wherever we go. Danny looked down at Flash, who was resting his head on the boy's lap. Doctor, Sarah, if you take the beeping thing out of Flash's neck, will it hurt the bad people who put it there? Dr. Sarah blinked in surprise at the question. What do you mean, sweetie? I mean, if they can't find Flash anymore, will they get in trouble with their boss for losing him? The innocent question revealed a level of strategic thinking that amazed all 3 adults. Danny wasn't just worried about protecting the dogs. He was thinking about how to turn the tables on their pursuers. Jake laughed despite the tension. Kid, you're going to make a great detective someday. As they drove through the storm-damaged streets toward the highway, Marcus watched his son continue to comfort 3 traumatized animals while demonstrating wisdom far beyond his years. Whatever lay ahead, he knew Danny would face it with the same quiet courage he had shown in that alley the night before. But first, they had to reach safety. And behind them, Marcus could see a dark sedan pulling into traffic, maintaining just enough distance to avoid being obvious. The chase was about to begin. Do you think Danny's innocent question might actually be the key to stopping the people who are hunting them? The drive to Jake's sister's cabin should have taken an hour, but with the storm damage and their need to avoid being followed, it stretched into nearly 2 hours of careful navigation through back roads and small towns. Jake used every trick he had learned in police training to lose their tail, doubling back through residential neighborhoods and taking sudden turns that would reveal anyone following them. Danny spent the entire journey talking to the 3 dogs, creating elaborate stories about brave animals who found new families and lived happily ever after. His constant chatter seemed to keep Rex, Misty, and Flash calm, despite the stress of another car ride so soon after their traumatic rescue. And then, the magic dog found a little boy who understood dog language. Danny was saying to Flash, and they became best friends and went on adventures together, and nobody was ever scared again. Dr. Sarah smiled as she listened. You know, Danny, there's actually some truth to that story. Dogs and children often do have a special connection that adults don't understand. That's because kids and dogs both know how to listen with their hearts instead of just their ears, Danny replied matter-of-factly. Marcus caught Jake's eye in the rearview mirror. The officer looked as amazed as Marcus felt by Danny's constant insights. Kid's got a point, Jake said. My K9 training instructor always said the best handlers were the ones who could think like their dogs. As they turned onto the dirt road leading to the cabin, Rex suddenly perked up and looked out the window with interest rather than anxiety. The change in his demeanor was noticeable. His tail actually wagged slightly as he watched the forest scenery pass by. "He likes it here," Danny observed. "I think he remembers being in places like this before. Good places." Dr. Sarah turned to study Rex more carefully. "That makes sense. If these dogs were a part of a search and rescue or military program, they would have trained in rural environments like this." The cabin appeared through the trees like something from a storybook. It was small but well-maintained, with a wraparound porch and large windows that looked out over a clearing surrounded by tall pines. Most importantly, it was completely isolated, with no other buildings visible in any direction. Jake parked behind the cabin, where the car wouldn't be visible from the main road. "No cell service out here, like I promised. But there's a landline inside if we need to contact anyone." As they unloaded their supplies and helped the dogs out of the car, Marcus noticed how different the animals seemed in this environment. The constant tension they had carried since the rescue began to ease. Misty actually lifted her nose to sniff the forest air with what looked like pleasure. Flash tested his weight on his injured paw and took a few experimental steps on the soft pine needle carpet. And Rex moved with the confident bearing of a dog who knew how to navigate wild spaces. "This feels right for them," Danny said, watching the dogs explore their new surroundings. "Like they're remembering who they used to be." Inside, the cabin was rustic but comfortable, with a large stone fireplace, worn leather furniture, and windows on all sides that provided excellent visibility of the surrounding area. Jake immediately began checking sightlines and exit routes, his police training taking over. Dr. Sarah set up a makeshift surgical area on the kitchen table, laying out sterilized instruments and preparing anesthesia for Flash's tracking device removal surgery. "This is going to be delicate work," she explained to Danny, who had appointed himself as her assistant. "The device is very close to some important nerves in his neck." "Will Flash be okay?" Danny asked, gently stroking the dog's head. "He'll be fine, but I need you to help me keep him calm before we start. Can you do that?" Danny nodded seriously and knelt beside Flash, beginning a soft conversation about all the good things that would happen after the scary beeping thing was gone from his neck. Meanwhile, Marcus and Jake were developing a security plan for their stay at the cabin. Jake had brought his police radio, which worked even without cell service, allowing them to stay in contact with his department. "I've got officers investigating the van that was watching your apartment," Jake reported after checking in with dispatch. "And we're running background checks on that zip tie code you found. Any results yet?" "Preliminary search suggests KR9 might be connected to a private security contractor that works with government agencies. We're digging deeper, but these kinds of companies keep their client lists confidential." Marcus felt a chill. "So we're dealing with professionals. Looks that way. But the good news is that if this is a legitimate security contractor, they're bound by laws about how they can recover their property. They can't just break into your apartment or threaten you. And if they're not legitimate," Jake's expression darkened, "then we've got bigger problems." Their conversation was interrupted by Dr. Sarah calling for assistance. "I'm ready to begin the surgery. Danny, I need you to keep talking to Flash while I work. Your voice will help him stay relaxed." The next 30 minutes were tense as Dr. Sarah carefully worked to remove the tracking device from Flash's neck. Danny never stopped talking to the sedated dog, telling him stories about brave adventures and promising that everything would be better when he woke up. "Almost got it," Dr. Sarah murmured, working with delicate precision. "It's more complex than I expected. This isn't just a tracking device, it's got multiple components." "What kind of components?" Jake asked. "Looks like GPS tracking, audio recording capability, and something else I can't identify. This is sophisticated surveillance equipment." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "They've been listening to us?" "Possibly, and recording everything the dogs have heard since they were implanted." Dr. Sarah finally extracted the device, a small black cylinder about the size of a large pill. It was still blinking with a tiny LED light, confirming that it had been actively transmitting. "Should we destroy it?" Marcus asked. Danny, who had been focused entirely on comforting Flash, suddenly looked up with an idea that would change everything. "Wait," he said, "what if we don't break it? What if we use it to trick the bad people?" All three adults stared at the 5-year-old boy. "What do you mean, buddy?" Jake asked. "Well, If the beeping thing tells the bad people where Flash is, and we put it somewhere else, won't they go look in the wrong place? Dr. Sarah's eyes lit up with understanding. That's actually brilliant. We could plant false location data. More than that, Jake added, catching on to Danny's idea. We could set a trap. They spent the next hour developing a plan based on Danny's innocent but ingenious suggestion. Jake would take the tracking device back to the city and plant it at a location where they could control the environment and have backup ready. Meanwhile, Dr. Sarah would monitor Flash's recovery, and Marcus would stay with Danny and all 3 dogs at the cabin. It's risky, Jake admitted. If these people are as dangerous as they seem, confronting them directly could escalate the situation. But if we don't stop them now, they'll never give up looking for the dogs, Marcus pointed out. And next time, we might not be so lucky. Danny was sitting on the floor with Rex, Misty, and Flash, all 3 dogs now completely relaxed in the safe environment of the cabin. Flash was groggy from the anesthesia, but alert enough to wag his tail when Danny petted him. The dogs don't want to run anymore, Danny said quietly. They want to have a home where nobody can hurt them. But they can't do that, while the bad people are still looking for them. His simple statement crystallized what they all knew, but hadn't wanted to admit. Running and hiding wasn't a long-term solution. The only way to truly protect the dogs was to stop the people who were hunting them. Okay, Jake said finally, we do this, but we do it smart and we do it safe. As Jake prepared to leave with the tracking device, Dr. Sarah continued monitoring Flash's vital signs. The surgery had been successful, but she wanted to make sure there were no complications from the anesthesia. His heart rate is good, breathing is normal, she reported. He should be fully recovered by tomorrow. Danny had settled down for a nap, with all 3 dogs arranged around him like furry bodyguards. The stress of the last 24 hours was finally catching up with the boy, and Marcus was grateful to see him resting peacefully. But their tranquil afternoon was shattered when Jake's radio crackled to life with an urgent message. Unit 47, be advised we have a situation at the downtown animal shelter. Multiple armed suspects attempting to gain access to the dog kennels. They're claiming to be federal agents, but their credentials don't check out. Jake grabbed the radio. Dispatch, this is Williams. Are the suspects looking for specific animals? Affirmative. They have photos of 3 German shepherds and claim the dogs are stolen federal property. Marcus felt his blood run cold. They're not just tracking the dogs. They're searching every place the dogs might have been taken. Which means they'll eventually work their way out here, Dr. Sarah added grimly. Jake was already moving toward the door. I need to get back to town and coordinate with the other officers. The tracking device plan just became our only option. But as he reached for the door handle, Rex suddenly stood up and moved to the window facing the forest. His body language was alert, but not alarmed. More like he was recognizing something familiar. What is it, Rex? Danny asked, instantly awake despite his exhaustion. Rex whined softly and pawed at the window. Through the glass, they could see movement in the tree line, not threatening, but definitely human. We've got company, Jake said, reaching for his weapon. But before anyone could react further, a voice called out from the forest. Federal agents, we have the cabin surrounded. Send out the dogs and nobody gets hurt. Marcus instinctively moved to shield Danny, while Dr. Sarah positioned herself near the medical supplies. But Rex's reaction was the most interesting. Instead of cowering or showing aggression, the big dog tilted his head as if listening to something specific about the voice outside. That's not a real federal agent, Danny said with startling confidence. How can you tell? Jake asked. Because Rex knows what real federal agents sound like, and that's not it. The boy's observation was so matter-of-fact that it took a moment for the implications to sink in. If Rex could distinguish between legitimate law enforcement and imposters, it meant his training was even more sophisticated than they had realized. Federal agents don't announce themselves like movie villains, Jake agreed, his police training kicking in. Real feds would have proper warrants and backup. These are the people who dumped the dogs. Another voice called out, this one from a different direction. You have 60 seconds to send out the animals or we're coming in. Danny stood up and moved to Rex, placing his small hand on the dog's neck where the tracking device had been removed. Rex, do you want to go with those people? The big dog looked directly into Danny's eyes and let out a low, rumbling growl that clearly communicated his answer. Rex says no, Danny translated unnecessarily. Jake was already on his radio, calling for backup, but they all knew help was at least 30 minutes away. In the meantime, they were trapped in a cabin with 3 traumatized dogs and facing off against unknown numbers of armed criminals. "There's a storm cellar under the kitchen," Dr. Sarah said, remembering the cabin's layout from previous visits. "We could get the dogs down there and—" Her suggestion was cut off by the sound of breaking glass as someone threw a rock through one of the front windows. But instead of following up with an immediate assault, the attackers seemed to be waiting for something. "They're stalling," Jake realized, "probably waiting for more people to arrive, or for us to panic and make a mistake." Danny had moved to comfort Misty, who was shaking again at the sound of breaking glass. But his next words surprised everyone. "What if we don't hide? What if we let them come in?" "Danny, that's too dangerous," Marcus said immediately. "No, Dad. Think about it. They want Rex and Misty and Flash, right? But they don't know about Flash's surgery. They think they can still track him." Dr. Sarah caught on first. "The tracking device. They're probably following the signal, but the device isn't here anymore." "Exactly," Danny continued with the logic of a 5-year-old who saw solutions adults missed. "So when they come in and don't find what they're looking for, they'll be confused. And confused bad guys make mistakes." Jake stared at the boy in amazement. "Kid, you're thinking like a tactical specialist. I'm thinking like someone who doesn't want Rex and Misty and Flash to be scared anymore." Outside, the voices were getting closer and more impatient. "Time's up! We're coming in! Everyone get down!" Jake ordered, taking position by the door with his weapon drawn. But as the first shadow appeared in the broken window, Rex did something unexpected. Instead of cowering or preparing to fight, he sat down calmly and let out a single, controlled bark, the kind of sound a trained dog makes when responding to a command. "What was that?" Dr. Sarah whispered. Danny's eyes were bright with understanding. Rex just told them he's not afraid anymore. And in that moment, Marcus realized his son was right. The big dog's confident bark wasn't a sound of fear or aggression. It was the sound of a highly trained animal who had remembered his purpose and was ready to protect the family that had saved him. The real confrontation was about to begin, but now they had something the criminals hadn't counted on. They had Rex. What do you think Rex is planning to do, and will Danny's brave plan actually work against armed criminals? The front door exploded inward with a crash that shook the entire cabin. 3 men in dark tactical gear burst through, weapons drawn, moving with the precision of trained operatives. But they stopped short when they saw the scene in front of them. Danny sat cross-legged on the floor in the center of the room, completely calm, with Rex lying beside him in a perfect downstay position. Misty was pressed against Danny's other side, and Flash, despite his recent surgery, had positioned himself protectively behind the boy. None of the dogs were cowering or showing fear. "Where's the tracking signal?" the lead man demanded, holding up a handheld device that was beeping frantically but showing confused readings. "I don't know what you're talking about," Marcus said from his position near the kitchen, hands visible but ready to move if necessary. The second man, taller and obviously in charge, stepped forward. "Mr. Cole," he said to the lead man, "the signal shows the device is in this building." Danny looked up at them with the innocent curiosity of a 5-year-old. "Are you looking for something?" Mr. Cole ignored the boy and gestured to his companions. "Search the room, check under furniture, in closets, anywhere a dog could hide." But as they began their search, Rex did something that changed the entire dynamic of the situation. He stood up slowly, placed himself directly between Danny and the intruders, and issued a single, commanding bark that echoed through the cabin like a gunshot. The 3 men froze. The sound Rex had made wasn't the bark of a frightened or aggressive dog. It was the bark of a highly trained working animal taking control of a situation. "That's a command bark," the third man said nervously. "These dogs are active duty." "Impossible," Mr. Cole snapped. "These are surplus animals, washed out, failures." But Rex's posture told a different story. He stood at perfect attention, head high, eyes alert, every muscle coiled with controlled power. This wasn't a discarded failure. This was a dog who remembered his training and was ready to use it. Danny reached up and gently placed his hand on Rex's side. "It's okay, boy. They're just confused." The simple gesture had an immediate effect. Rex relaxed slightly but maintained his protective stance while Misty and Flash moved closer to Danny, creating a protective formation around the boy. "Kid," the tall man said, his voice less aggressive now, "we need to take these dogs with us. They belong to the government." "No, they don't," Danny replied with the matter-of-fact certainty that only children possess. "Nobody who really cared about them would throw them away in a trash bin." Mr. Cole's face flushed red. "You don't understand the situation, boy. These animals are classified assets. Taking them is a theft of federal property." Jake, who had been quietly positioning himself for the best tactical advantage, spoke up from his position near the door. "Funny thing about federal agents, they usually have warrants and badges, and they don't break into private property like common criminals." The tall man's hand moved toward his weapon, but Rex immediately shifted his stance, preparing to spring. The movement was so fluid and professional that all three intruders took an involuntary step backward. "Stand down, Morrison," Mr. Cole ordered. "We can't afford complications." Dr. Sarah, who had been using the chaos to discreetly prepare something from her medical bag, suddenly spoke up. "You know, I've been listening to your conversation, and I'm curious about something." "What?" Cole snapped. "If these dogs are really federal property, why do they have surgery scars from tracking device implantation? Federal working dogs are chipped at birth with permanent identification. They don't need additional tracking hardware unless..." She paused dramatically. "Unless someone stole them and was trying to keep tabs on them illegally." The third man, Morrison, shifted uncomfortably. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Actually, I do. I'm a veterinarian, and I've worked with legitimate canine units. I know what proper documentation looks like, and I know that real federal agents don't operate like this." Danny had been listening to the adult conversation while keeping one hand on Rex and watching the three men carefully. His 5-year-old mind was processing information in ways that surprised everyone. "Mr. Cole," Danny said suddenly, "why are you so scared of Rex?" The question caught everyone off guard. Cole's face darkened. "I'm not scared of a dog, kid." "Yes, you are," Danny continued with innocent persistence. "Your voice gets shaky when you look at him, and you keep stepping away when he moves. Why?" Rex tilted his head at Danny's voice, then looked directly at Mr. Cole with what could only be described as recognition. A low rumble started in the big dog's chest. Not quite a growl, but definitely a warning. "He knows you," Dr. Sarah realized. "Rex recognizes this man." "That's impossible," Cole said, but his voice lacked conviction. Danny stood up slowly, keeping his hand on Rex's neck. "Rex, did this man hurt you before?" The big dog's response was immediate and unmistakable. He took 2 steps forward, placing himself between Danny and Cole, and let out a bark that was clearly accusatory. Not aggressive, not frightened, but the sound of a dog identifying someone who had wronged him. "Rex remembers you," Danny said to Cole. "You're one of the bad people who hurt him, and Misty, and Flash." The boy's simple statement hung in the air like an accusation. Cole's face had gone pale, and both of his companions were looking at him with new suspicion. "This is ridiculous," Cole blustered. "A dog can't identify anyone. They're just animals." But Morrison was backing toward the door. "Cole, if that dog knows you, that means you had direct contact with these animals. You told us this was a simple recovery operation." "It is," Cole insisted. "These dogs are stolen property, and we're authorized to..." His words were cut off by the sound of sirens in the distance. Jake's backup was finally arriving, but they were still several minutes away. The tall man grabbed Cole's arm. "We need to go. Now." "Not without the dogs," Cole insisted. "The client is paying too much for us to return empty-handed." Danny looked up at the 3 men with the fearless curiosity of a child who didn't fully understand the danger he was in. "Who's the client? Why do they want Rex and Misty and Flash so badly?" "Kid, you ask too many questions," Morrison muttered. "My dad says asking questions is how you learn important things," Danny replied. "And I think it's important to know why you're trying to steal our dogs." "They're not your dogs!" Cole exploded. "Yes, they are," Danny said with absolute certainty. "We saved them. They chose us. That makes them family." Rex responded to Danny's declaration by sitting down next to the boy and placing a protective paw on his lap. The gesture was so human-like in its intentionality that even the hardened criminals seemed moved by it. Dr. Sarah used the moment of distraction to activate something she had prepared from her medical bag, a small recording device that she had started when the men first entered the cabin. "You know," she said conversationally, "this entire conversation is being recorded, including your admission that you're working for a client who pays for stolen dogs." Cole's eyes widened as he realized the implications. "You can't." "Already did," Dr. Sarah replied calmly, "and it's being transmitted to a secure server. Even if you take the device, the recording is safe." The tall man was growing increasingly agitated. "Cole, we need to abort this operation, cut our losses and go." But Cole seemed to have lost all rational thinking. "No, I'm not going back empty-handed, not after what these dogs cost us." He lunged toward Danny and Rex, but what happened next would be talked about for years afterward by everyone who witnessed it. Rex moved like lightning, intercepting Cole's advance with a perfectly executed takedown that was clearly the result of professional training. The big dog didn't bite or maul. Instead, he used his body weight and momentum to knock Cole to the ground and pin him there, holding the man down with controlled pressure. At the same moment, Misty and Flash flanked the other two men, not attacking, but positioning themselves to prevent escape. Their movements were coordinated and precise, the result of training that had never been fully erased despite their trauma. Danny stood in the center of it all, completely unafraid, one hand on Rex's back as the dog held Cole immobilized. "Good boy, Rex," Danny said softly. "You remembered how to protect people." Jake moved quickly to secure the other two men, who seemed too stunned by the dog's coordinated response to resist effectively. "Hands behind your heads! You're under arrest for breaking and entering, attempted kidnapping, and theft of federal property." "We didn't steal anything," Morrison protested. "No, but you tried to," Dr. Sarah pointed out. "And you just confessed on recording that you're working for someone who pays for stolen dogs." The sirens were getting closer now, and through the broken window, they could see the flashing lights of multiple police vehicles approaching through the forest. Cole struggled futilely under Rex's weight. "You don't understand what you're interfering with. These dogs are part of something bigger than you can imagine." "What kind of something?" Danny asked with innocent curiosity. "Danny, don't..." Marcus started to warn his son away from getting more information from the criminals, but Cole was too angry to think clearly. These dogs were trained for classified operations, counterterrorism, drug interdiction, high-value target protection. They're worth hundreds of thousands of dollars each. "Then why were they in a trash bin?" Danny asked. The simple question hit like a physical blow. Cole's face went through a series of expressions before settling on defeated rage. "Because they wouldn't forget their previous handlers," he admitted bitterly. "They were too loyal to the agents who originally trained them. When those agents were reassigned, the dogs became difficult to manage." Dr. Sarah felt a chill of understanding. "You're saying these dogs were discarded because they were too loyal? They wouldn't bond with new handlers, kept trying to return to their original teams, made them unreliable for new missions." Danny's young face showed confusion and outrage. "So you threw them away because they loved their first families too much?" "We tried to retrain them," Morrison added defensively, "but they kept failing the loyalty tests." "Loyalty tests?" Marcus asked. "Scenarios where they had to choose between following orders and protecting their original handlers," the tall man explained. "They chose their handlers every time." Danny looked down at Rex, who was still calmly holding Cole on the ground, and then at Misty and Flash, who maintained their guard positions despite having every reason to be terrified. "You're all very stupid," Danny announced with the blunt honesty of a 5-year-old. "Excuse me?" Cole sputtered. "You threw away the best dogs in the world because they were too good at loving people. That's not a failure. That's what makes them perfect." Rex's tail wagged slightly at Danny's words, but he maintained his professional composure, keeping Cole securely pinned until the arriving officers could take over. The next few minutes were controlled chaos as Jake's backup arrived and began processing the crime scene. The 3 criminals were arrested and read their rights, while paramedics checked everyone for injuries. Danny refused to leave Rex's side during the entire process, translating the dog's needs and concerns for the officers who were trying to understand the situation. "Rex wants to know if the bad people are going to jail," Danny informed Detective Maria Santos, who had arrived to take charge of the investigation. "For a very long time," Detective Santos assured him, "but we need to understand more about what these men were doing and who they were working for." Dr. Sarah handed over her recording device with the full confession. Everything you need is on here, including the admission that they were working for a client who pays for stolen federal working dogs. Detective Santos listened to portions of the recording and whistled softly. This is bigger than a simple animal theft case. We're talking about a black market operation involving classified military assets. Marcus felt overwhelmed by the implications. What does this mean for us, for the dogs? It means, Detective Santos said, that you and your son just helped break up a major criminal operation. And these 3 dogs are going to be heroes when this story gets out. Danny looked up from where he was sitting with Rex, Misty, and Flash. Does that mean we get to keep them? Well, Detective Santos smiled. Considering they were illegally obtained by the criminals, and considering they clearly chose you as their new family, I think there's a very good case to be made for letting them stay where they're happy. Rex responded to this news by finally releasing his guard posture and moving to lie down next to Danny. Misty and Flash immediately joined them, creating a pile of dogs and boy that looked like the most natural thing in the world. Besides, Detective Santos added, after what I just witnessed, I think these dogs have found the only handler they'll ever need. Danny beamed up at the detective. Rex and Misty and Flash are the smartest, bravest dogs in the whole world, and now they're home. But as the celebration continued around them, Marcus noticed Detective Santos having a quiet conversation with Jake near the door. Something about their body language suggested the story wasn't over yet. What's wrong? He asked, joining their conversation. Detective Santos looked serious. The man Cole mentioned a client, someone who was paying for stolen military working dogs. We need to find out who that client is and what they plan to do with animals trained for classified operations. Jake nodded grimly. Because if there's a market for this kind of theft, Rex, Misty, and Flash might not be the only victims. What do you think the mysterious client wanted with trained military dogs? And how many more animals might still be in danger? The investigation that followed would uncover one of the largest illegal animal trafficking operations in the country's history. Over the next 2 weeks, Detective Santos and her team traced Cole's operation back to its source, revealing a network that stretched across multiple states and involved dozens of stolen military and police working dogs. Danny became an unofficial consultant to the investigation, helping the detectives understand the behavioral patterns of traumatized working dogs. His natural ability to communicate with Rex, Misty, and Flash proved invaluable in interpreting evidence and understanding how the criminal operation had functioned. The dogs remember everything, Danny explained to Detective Santos during one of their sessions at the police station. Rex can tell you exactly how many bad places he was kept in before he ended up in the trash bin. How can you tell what he's remembering? Detective Santos asked, genuinely curious about the boy's abilities. Watch his ears, Danny said, sitting beside Rex in the interview room. When I ask him about the scary places, his left ear twitches. Different twitches for different places. Detective Santos watched carefully as Danny asked Rex a series of questions about his experiences. Sure enough, the dog's ear movements seemed to correspond to different memories, creating a pattern that Danny could read like a book. Rex says there were 4 different places, Danny reported. The first one wasn't too bad. That's where his real family was. Then 3 scary places where the bad people kept him. Dr. Sarah, who had been working with federal veterinarians to examine other recovered dogs, confirmed Danny's interpretation. We've found similar trauma patterns in the other animals we've rescued. They all show signs of being moved through multiple facilities. The breakthrough in the case came when Cole, facing serious federal charges, finally agreed to cooperate with investigators. His confession revealed the scope of the operation and identified the mysterious client who had been purchasing stolen working dogs. Marcus and Danny were in Detective Santos's office when she received the news. Danny was on the floor with Rex, working on a puzzle while the big dog watched with patient interest. Misty was curled up in the corner, still shy around strangers, but comfortable enough to sleep in the police station. Flash was demonstrating his recovered mobility by carrying toys back and forth across the room. We got him, Detective Santos announced, hanging up her phone. The client Cole was working for is a man named Vincent Hartley. He runs a private military contractor that provides security services to foreign governments. What did he want with stolen military dogs? Marcus asked. According to Cole's statement, Hartley was building his own K-9 program using animals that were already trained for classified operations. He could offer his clients pre-trained working dogs without going through the time and expense of training new animals. Danny looked up from his puzzle. So he was stealing other people's dogs to make money? Exactly. And when the dogs wouldn't work properly for new handlers, he had them disposed of rather than risk exposure of his operation. The callousness of it made Marcus's stomach turn. How many dogs are we talking about? Based on Cole's records, at least 40 animals over the past 2 years. Rex, Misty, and Flash were just the most recent. Danny's face showed the kind of outrage that only comes from pure moral clarity. We have to find all the other dogs. They're probably scared and missing their real families. We're working on it, Detective Santos assured him. But it's complicated. Some of the dogs may have been sold to overseas clients. Others might have been disposed of when they proved difficult to retrain. The implication hung in the air like a dark cloud. Danny might have saved 3 dogs, but there were many others they would never be able to help. Over the following days, federal agents raided Hartley's facilities in 3 states, recovering 22 dogs and arresting dozens of people involved in the trafficking operation. Each rescue brought new stories of trauma and resilience, and each rescued dog seemed to confirm Danny's belief that the animals never forgot their original handlers. Danny insisted on visiting the temporary shelter where the recovered dogs were being housed, and his presence had an almost magical effect on the traumatized animals. Dogs that had been unresponsive to veterinarians and handlers would perk up when the 5-year-old boy entered their kennels. It's like he speaks their language, observed Dr. Jennifer Kim, the federal veterinarian overseeing the recovery operation. These animals have been through terrible trauma, but they respond to Danny in ways we've never seen. He understands what it feels like to lose your family, Marcus explained, watching his son comfort a German shepherd who had been recovered from one of Hartley's facilities. His mother died when he was very young. I think he recognizes that kind of loss in the dogs. The media attention around the case grew intense as details of the trafficking operation became public. Danny found himself at the center of a story that captured hearts around the world. A 5-year-old boy who had saved 3 dogs and helped expose a major criminal operation. But Danny was more interested in practical matters than publicity. He had appointed himself as the official spokesperson for Rex, Misty, and Flash, and he took the responsibility seriously. Rex wants everyone to know that he's not angry at the bad people, Danny announced during a press conference at the police station. He's just happy to be safe and to have a family again. How do you know what Rex is thinking? Asked a reporter. Because I listen to his heart instead of just his ears, Danny replied matter-of-factly. His heart says he's grateful and happy, and he wants other scared dogs to know they can be happy too. The press conference became an internet sensation, with Danny's innocent wisdom touching millions of viewers around the world. But the most powerful moment came when Detective Santos announced the final resolution of the case. Vincent Hartley has been arrested and charged with federal crimes related to animal trafficking, fraud, and conspiracy, she reported. His organization has been completely dismantled, and all recovered animals are being returned to their original handlers or placed in appropriate homes. What about Rex, Misty, and Flash? A reporter asked. Detective Santos smiled and looked down at Danny, who was sitting on the floor with all 3 dogs arranged around him. Based on the behavior assessment conducted by federal experts and considering the extraordinary bond these animals have formed with their rescue family, Rex, Misty, and Flash have been officially released to the permanent custody of Marcus and Danny Chen. The room erupted in applause, but Danny seemed more focused on the dogs than the celebration. He hugged each of them and whispered something in their ears that made their tails wag. What did you tell them? Detective Santos asked. I told them they never have to be scared again, because now they have a forever family. But the story didn't end with the press conference. Over the following months, Danny's connection with traumatized working dogs led to an unexpected development. The federal K-9 training program reached out to Marcus with an unusual request. We'd like Danny to work with our rehabilitation program, explained Agent Lisa Torres during a meeting at their home. We have dogs that have been returned from overseas deployments with PTSD. Traditional therapy isn't working, but after seeing what Danny accomplished with Rex, Misty, and Flash, we think he might be able to help. Marcus looked at his 5-year-old son, who was teaching Flash how to play fetch with a tennis ball in their backyard. The dog's injured paw had healed completely, and he moved with the confidence of an animal who had rediscovered joy. It would just be a few hours a week, Agent Torres continued. Danny would work with our veterinary team to help traumatized dogs remember how to trust humans again. Can Rex and Misty and Flash come too? Danny asked, having overheard the conversation. Actually, that's part of the program, Agent Torres smiled. Recovered dogs often help traumatized dogs heal faster. Rex, Misty, and Flash could serve as therapy animals themselves. The idea of his 3 rescued dogs helping other animals heal from trauma appealed to Danny immediately. They would be really good at that job. They know how scary it feels, and they know how good it feels to be safe again. Marcus agreed to let Danny participate in the program on a limited basis, with the understanding that school and normal childhood activities would always come first. But watching his son work with traumatized animals, Marcus realized this wasn't just a volunteer activity. It was Danny's calling. The first session at the federal facility was remarkable. Danny entered a kennel containing a Belgian Malinois named Duke, who had been returned from a deployment in Afghanistan with severe anxiety. Duke had been unresponsive to all previous therapy attempts and was considered a candidate for euthanasia. Danny sat quietly in the kennel for 20 minutes, not trying to touch Duke or force interaction. Rex lay down outside the kennel where Duke could see him, demonstrating calm, safe behavior. "Duke," Danny said finally, "Rex wants you to know that the scary loud noises can't reach you here." Duke's ears perked up slightly, the first response he had shown in weeks. "Rex used to have nightmares about scary places too," Danny continued, "but now he sleeps all the way through the night because he knows someone loves him enough to keep him safe." Slowly, carefully, Duke moved closer to where Danny was sitting. The progress was microscopic, but it was the first voluntary movement the dog had made toward a human since his return. Dr. Kim watched through the observation window with tears in her eyes. "In 20 years of veterinary medicine, I've never seen anything like this." Over the following months, Danny worked with 17 different dogs in the rehabilitation program. Each success story was unique, but they all shared common elements: patience, understanding, and the kind of unconditional love that only a child could offer. Rex, Misty, and Flash became official therapy dogs, helping other traumatized animals learn to trust again. Their own recovery became a model for understanding how animals could heal from systematic abuse and neglect. The program gained national attention, and Danny found himself speaking at veterinary conferences and animal welfare seminars around the country. But he never lost sight of what mattered most: helping scared animals feel safe again. "People always ask me how I know what the dogs are thinking," Danny said during one of his speeches. "But it's not about knowing, it's about caring enough to listen." The speech was given at a conference 6 months after the rescue, and Danny had grown visibly during that time, not just physically, but emotionally and intellectually. The experience of saving Rex, Misty, and Flash had awakened something in him that would shape the rest of his life. After the conference, Marcus and Danny returned home to find their 3 dogs waiting for them in the backyard, playing together with the carefree joy of animals who had forgotten what it felt like to be afraid. "Dad," Danny said, watching Rex chase a butterfly while Misty and Flash wrestled in the grass, "do you think they remember being in that trash bin?" "I think they remember," Marcus replied, "but I don't think it scares them anymore. They know that part of their story is over." Danny nodded seriously. "And now they get to help other dogs learn that scary stories can have happy endings too." As the sun set over their backyard, Danny settled down with his 3 dogs for their evening story time. It had become a daily ritual. Danny would tell them about their adventures, about the other dogs they had helped, and about all the good things that tomorrow might bring. "Once upon a time," Danny began, "there were 3 very brave dogs who forgot how to trust people. But then they met a little boy who reminded them that love is stronger than fear." Rex, Misty, and Flash settled around Danny with the contentment of animals who had found their place in the world. Their story had begun in darkness and trauma, but it had become something beautiful, a testament to the power of compassion, the resilience of the spirit, and the extraordinary bond between humans and animals. Marcus watched his son and their 3 dogs, and he knew their story was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. The next morning brought news that would change their lives once again. Agent Torres called with an unexpected announcement. "The president wants to meet Danny and the dogs," she said. "There's going to be a ceremony honoring civilian heroes who helped break up the trafficking operation." Danny's work with traumatized animals has caught national attention. Danny's response to the news was typically practical. "Can we bring cookies for the other dogs that are going to be there?" Marcus laughed, realizing that his 5-year-old son had somehow managed to remain completely humble despite becoming a national hero. "I think that can be arranged," he said. And so their story continued, not with fame or recognition as the goal, but with the simple understanding that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can change the world. What do you think Danny and his 3 hero dogs will accomplish next? And how many more animals will benefit from their incredible bond? Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe for more amazing stories of courage, compassion, and the unbreakable bonds between humans and animals. Your support helps us bring these heartwarming tales to people around the world who need to remember that even in the darkest times, love and kindness always find a way to shine through.